film Grounded, which, as you know, is part of the Your Story Matters campaign by Rhino. We have another special guest with us here today, so we're going to hop into it here in just a minute. We're just going to wait for things to sync up for just a bit. But I personally am pretty happy to be here because this means we're getting towards that end. We've got our production completed, and now we're in the middle, knee deep, if not waist deep. And by the end of the day, we're going to be neck deep in post-production. So really looking forward to getting through all of this and having this story. There's a lot of meaning in it to me personally as we've been invested in this. And as I watched all of the submissions that you guys sent in, they were beautiful. They had meaning to them. They had depth. And so it's been a lot of responsibility. I feel like I felt that on my shoulders and the whole team to be able to make something that best depicts what you guys have put forth on your end. So we appreciate that. We appreciate you being here. And so without further ado, we're going to hop in here. So our guest today, I'm sure if you've spent any amount of time on YouTube or really any web streaming platform, that if you're looking for tips on color grading, that you know who we're talking about today. So we're going to be talking to Denver Riddle, and he has done so much for this space and helping educate and train, and also even gone as far as producing some amazing tools, and we'll be using some of those today. And so we're going to be talking more about what Denver's done in his career, how he's gotten here, and having him help us as we develop the look for our short film Grounded. Denver, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fine. Thanks, Brandon.
Well, it's so great to have you here with us, and we're looking forward to our discussion. So there's so many different parts of production, right? You've got the guys the people that are really into the gear side of things, and the people that are love just being on set. And then there's the whole side of post-production. What got you so into the grading portion of production?
Well, pretty much it started with all the above that you just mentioned. Originally, I wanted to be a cameraman, and I started my career as a director of photography because I love to work with cameras and set up shots and light them in cool and interesting ways. But the thing that I found was that once I got it into post, messing around with the image, I wasn't really quite able to get, what I had envisioned in my mind. And so that's kind of where color correction or color grading started, was just really kind of an extension of everything, like starting with, the right tool for the job, the right lens, the right, set of lighting. And, I just really felt like there was something that was missing. There was a missing piece to the puzzle. And I finally found that through color grading.
That's awesome. It's good to have that path of discovery, because I think that each of us need to have that. Like, we go through and we experiment with different parts of production. For those that are looking to, potentially become a colorist, or at least hire that out on a more focused effort, what would you suggest to them as some ways to get started?
Well, certainly YouTube is a great resource to get started. There's tons of free tutorials online. I would suggest purchasing, like a paid program, just because those people who have created those types of titles, training titles, tend to have more experience. And so you can pick up more than what you could say just by, some of the free information you find on YouTube. And then it's really just about getting experience. And one of the best ways to get experience is through networking with other filmmakers, other producers, directors of photography, and really just putting yourself out there so that you can gain that experience. And it's really through these kinds of ties that will lead to opportunities to color correct stuff or grade stuff professionally, because a client's not necessarily going to be looking for like a colorist. They're going to hire some kind of ad agency or production company, and having the ties with these kinds of people will lead to those opportunities to do it professionally.
Awesome. Yeah. Is there, like, There are so many videos about setting up your film kit. If somebody was looking to get into it from an equipment level, what are some of those entry things that you'd suggest having part of that coloring kit?
Honestly, the first thing would be your machine. Um, Making sure that you have a good machine. One of the biggest factors in today's modern post-production world is having a good graphics card. And there's been great strides made by the Nvidia folks, as well as Apple. They kind of have more of a relationship with AMD, but it's got to start with your machine. And it doesn't matter if it's Windows or if it's Macintosh, but being able to handle a good graphics card is going to help out tremendously in your video editing, your post production, and of course your color grading. Then from there, as far as tools that can assist you, there's control surfaces, they're panels that essentially map out a lot of the functions in the software to different buttons and knobs. And this is something, if you're wanting to be a colorist, or you're a small boutique facility, and you plan on doing a ton of color correction and color grading, this could be something that would be a smart investment. And of course, I failed to mention your monitor. A lot of content these days is delivered to the web, and so I'm not going to say you need to go out and buy the most expensive monitor if you're just delivering to the web, but you do need to make sure that it has a good calibration. And there's great solutions from X-Rite, from Spider. You'll definitely want to invest in one of these solutions to make sure that what you're looking at is the same as what other people should be looking at.
Perfect. Yeah, that's a great set of tips. I've definitely seen a lot out there about calibrating your monitor. I personally have not done that, but how often do you have to go through that cycle of things just to make sure that your colors are staying true?
You don't have to do it very often. A lot of the modern displays these days have really good colors that don't, the technology, they don't tend to shift too much. But I would suggest, doing a calibration, ever so often, just to make sure that things are looking accurate.
Yeah. Same way that we take care of our cameras. And if you're into a cinema camera and you're doing a black balance or things like that, just resetting that calibration, making sure that you're good to go and getting those
Yeah.
accurate colors. Awesome. Well, we've got a film to grade, and I can't think of anyone better, like I said in the intro, than you to help us out with that. How do you feel about digging into this and seeing what we can create?
Let's give it a try.
Okay. So I'm going to share this. And if you're watching on Instagram, it's going to be a bit cropped, but what I've got going here, so I just pulled out 3 clips from the project that resemble different moods and environments. We have Owen. We've seen this clip a couple of times now. This is the intro where he gets the news. He's looking over those bills, and he's sort of at like this dark point. And so that's why, this whole space was a bit of a challenge to film in, because everything was a hard white surface on the walls. So we want to create a bit more mood here. It is early morning, and so the light that is predominantly hitting him is coming through the back windows and hitting that, but we wanted to keep him more dark on front, just so that you kind of feel that gloom that he's going through in this moment. We have it framed up this way because there's a bit of foreshadowing what's happening with this guy here. So this still needs to be, there, but perhaps not as there as it is right now. And then this scene, it's actually on the opposite end. We intentionally framed the dad on the other end of the table, on the other end of the frame, just to feel that juxtaposition. And this is much, much darker, much moodier. And we're trying to set the tone of this man as he nears the end of his life, that it can be kind of lonely. And so darkness is closely associated with that oftentimes. And so we'll want to potentially bring that out even a little bit more. And then this final shot that we have, is more of a high point in the film. It's the we'll call it the teeter totter, where the mood really begins to change as Owen goes out on this path of self-discovery. In the midst of that, he actually ends up getting knocked in the face with this camera. So Denver, I don't know if you heard last week we talked about this, but we were on production and I unfortunately bumped the talent in the head with the corner of our door. And so we had to pivot the script a bit here and give a real motive as to how these two met. We knew they were going to meet anyways, so it was a bit fortuitous. Now we have a meeting of them. She has to help repair his head a bit here as he's nowhere by a mirror or anything that he can really self-examine. So this is that other shot. And so the difficulty that we're going to have with this one, and I can even bring in potentially another clip, is we were filming right at sunset. So the sun was behind us going over the mountain there. But then we're going to have to match cut this with some other shots that we did the next morning to give us some additional things. But we want to try and pull some of that mood together. It's not necessarily all going to be played in sequence, so we can fudge it a little bit if we have to. But these are essentially the 3 shots. So Denver, how about you talk to us a little bit about Cinema Grade? We have Cinema Grade here. It's a great plugin, and we'll talk about how we can use this to get these shots graded.
Okay. Well, Cinema Grade is a plugin that runs inside of, in this case, Final Cut. And essentially, once you apply it to your clips and you click Open Controls in the inspector, it launches this separate standalone interface. And what we've really done with Cinema Grade is we've really tried to make color grading easy, make the workflow simple and easy to be understood, and following some of the best practices. And you'll find that it's kind of laid out in a way that you basically work from left to right, starting in this case on the base correction. That's the page that we're in right now. The second navigation tab you see at the top is shot matching, where you get that continuity with all your shots, making them match. You mentioned some of those instances. And then once you get to the final grading page, this is essentially where you're applying that final look that fits with the narrative of the story.
Perfect. Okay, so we're here now in the base correction.
So if you look at the top left, the navigation up there, you see that's where you have all of your tools. And the tools are laid out also in a left to right fashion. Because a lot of time people are like, I don't know what to start with. I don't know if I should be starting with like my color wheels. I don't know if I should be starting with, should I use like the curves, And so what we've actually done is, we've even simplified that and just, you start from the left where you're adjusting, things like exposure and contrast. Then you move to like, say, the color temperature, making sure that the color temperature is right. And then, finally, you can adjust like the saturation. And you can do some really cool secondary color corrections with our vectors tool, where you can literally, click on an area in the image and change, its color. But I mean, looking at this, I mean, to me, I would consider this what's called scene referred. I'm looking at this as if I was on set. To me, this is the way that it looked when you were there. It looks really balanced really well. And so a lot of the time, if you shoot really well, ideally, you won't have to do as much color correction in post. A lot of the time when you're doing color correction is you're fixing problems. Further down the line, once you get to color grading, then you're starting to do things where you're trying to enhance the image and, pull off a certain like aesthetic. But, if you shoot well, then you won't have as much to do. But at any rate, just so that we can kind of play with this, if you tap, if you don't mind, I like to use keyboard shortcuts. Once you learn them as like, say an editor, it just allows you to streamline your workflow and work much more efficiently. But I'll also have you click on them and then I'll tell you what they are. But we've mapped the keyboard shortcuts, are actually more like hotkeys. We've made that intuitive. So like for adjusting the exposure, you would just tap E on the keyboard. And then, anywhere on the image you can click and you can drag up or down anywhere, and that'll, either darken or, brighten the shot. And so, visually you can just look at that and see, where it is that should be. I think that looks pretty good. If, say, for instance, you wanted to bring up more of the shadow detail, if you either click and hold the exposure tool in the top left, you kind of have to click and hold. It's kind of a hidden menu like in Photoshop. You should see shadows, midtones, and highlights. And what that does, it allows you selectively now, if you want to place a point on, like, say, his beard there in the shadow area. Now, if you click, now if you go back to that point, if you click and drag up, that's actually going to pull up the actual shadows, so you can bring more detail. Same with like the highlights. If you click on the picture, the photograph there in the background, you see this family standing there. If you click on, like, say, the dress, I was actually looking at the dress. If you click and pull down on that, that might actually be in the highlight areas, and you can pull down, the highlights. And then for the skin, you can click on the skin, which usually that's where, the mid range is. You can kind of pull up on that. So that's just kind of a quick, simple crash course in, doing the exposure. And then once we get to white balance, the first thing you can do is you can actually press A on the keyboard for auto, and that white balanced it. Now, to me, it doesn't look quite right. It looks more, clinical. But if you press W for white balance and drag up, you can kind of warm up the shot. There you go. And the white balancing algorithm we use is similar to what you'd find in like a digital camera. So a lot of the time it works really well. But if it doesn't, you can manually adjust it. Now, if you're wondering where like all of these changes are being saved, if you go over to the right, there's our inspector. It looks like there's a question. Is there a plugin? I don't know if that was from earlier. Question is this a plugin or a native feature in Final Cut? This is a plugin inside of, this is Cinema Grade. Perfect. That works as a plugin inside of Final Cut. But if you go over, hit the escape key, sorry. And then go over to the right, where that right arrow is on the right of the screen.
There we go. Okay.
Yeah. So all the changes are saved there. That's a traditional inspector, kind of like, what you'd find in, say, Lightroom.
Yeah. Perfect. That's really cool.
And then if you go down to the bottom arrow is where we have our navigation, where we have the clips that we've brought in. And you can, by clicking on those, you can go to those other shots.
So we can go through and do these same things. So I'm going to hit E for exposure. And actually, overall, it's just about there. We're going to be bringing out a bunch of noise if we try and lighten this overall. But if we go to shadows, hit that, get a bit more detail. So this is, we were shooting on the red Komodo, actually. So
okay,
still in
That's
beta,
awesome.
but it was fun.
Cool.
And it worked great. A lot of fun to shoot that. So I'm going to go here and see if we can pull a little bit of that back. And then just general midtones, lifting that a little. Okay. All right. What's up? Oh, no, now we got white balance. I actually think that we're pretty good on that warmer side. I'm going to go back to that exposure a little bit and get that a little darker on that base. Okay. What next, Sensei?
Go ahead and let's look at our last clip. Again, I want to emphasize, regardless of what software tool that you're using for color correction, whether you're in Final Cut, Adobe Premiere, or DaVinci Resolve, one of the first steps that you want to do is go through and fix the shots in your timeline. That's essentially what we're doing right here. And like I said, the navigation is laid out in Cinema Grade in such a way that it naturally walks you through that workflow of doing your base correction, making your shots match together, and then finally coming up with a final look. So this one, again, the top left-hand corner, you're like, what do I do? What do I start with? Well, you start with exposure and then you do contrast, and you kind of just work that way. But yeah, go ahead and just adjust, some of the exposure and stuff you see on the screen.
Yeah.
And just for your audience, sometimes it helps just for the sake of doing a demo is make big adjustments so it's a little more easier for them to see it. So even if you're kind of whacking the shot a little bit, just there you go. That makes it just a little bit easier for them
Really
to see kind of
crushing
what's
it.
happening. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is in our shadows here, pulling down. We actually do just want just a little bit more that phase, and then highlights. On a shot like this, where would you recommend grabbing from the
There's really
highlights?
not any highlights. So what I would do in the case that you don't feel like there's any shot, things in the shot that would be considered a highlight is just go to your inspector. Go ahead and hit the escape key if you haven't already.
Yep.
And then you can just go right to your midtones slider. Looks like, the highlights you were saying. The highlights are at 0. And now you can, kind of pull up on that
So yeah,
top
just
part of the
showing that
tonal range.
extreme there.
Yeah. Let me actually have you go to the menu at the top. For those that are kind of pixel peepers or are familiar with using the video scopes, feel comfortable in using those. If you go up to the view menu at the top,
Is
I think you have to
that?
go up. I think it's under view.
Oh, view. Okay.
And then you go down to video scopes.
Perfect.
So we can bring those at the bottom, and you can actually, if you click on the divider line, you can actually drag that up and enlarge the scopes, the space sort of in between them. There you go. And if you're not totally comfortable with using the video scopes and you're familiar with what false color is, a lot of different monitors have this. Blackmagic cameras have this. Atomos field monitors have this. If you go back up to the view menu again, we actually have a false color feature. And essentially what this does is all these colors, this overlays this over the image. This is not like baked in, but you can kind of actually see the different exposure levels. Now, the sweet spot for skin tones, generally, depending on context, but generally the sweet spot for skin tones are in the gray, green, and pink areas. And so I think we're looking pretty good because we can see some green on her face. You don't actually see it in this, but if you go over to the highlights in the inspector and just whack it, drag it up, once you start to see red, you know that you've gone above 100 IRE, or the detail in the highlights has gone into clip where we're losing that information. And so, the areas in the shadows that are being crushed will, I think, should go to purple, but so it's just kind of a nice little visual representation. And then as you're working from left to right, then you can try white balancing the shot. You could certainly start with A and see what the auto does for us.
That's actually, yeah, that pulled it where it needed to go pretty much.
Yeah. And then from there, if you hit S for saturation, or, it's the same, the button's up there too.
Mm-hmm.
Dragging up, you can increase or decrease the saturation of the shot. But again, we're just trying to get this to look scene referred. We're not necessarily driving towards a certain look yet or a certain mood. We're just trying to make everything look scene referred the same way as if you were on set, the way things looked. And sorry, go ahead.
I was just got it 100%.
So that pretty much, as far as these 3 clips we're working on, that pretty much wraps up the base correction page. Once you kind of get everything looking the way, it looks natural, then you're done with that step. And then you can move on to shot matching. Now in here, I won't spend a lot of time, but if you do have, a number of clips that are in the same scene, what you would do is you would actually group them together, but we'll just pretend like the first and second clip are part of the same scene. And so, yep, that's it. So now if you click on match shots over to the upper right-hand corner, this displays them in a side-by-side view. So a color grading secret I like to share is the easiest way to match 2 shots together is to get them into a side-by-side view in your software. And all the 3 big softwares of Final Cut, Adobe Premiere, and DaVinci Resolve have a way of supporting this and allowing you to do this. But seeing them this way, you can really, clearly see by eyeball. You can spot those mismatches or those differences. The shot on the left is, regardless of whether you're using Cinema Grade or another software, generally the shot on your left is sort of like your hero shot, or the shot that you're trying to match the other shots in the scene to. And so right now it's just kind of there as a reference, but if you go over to the right, the clip on the right, you can actually, bring out the color tools and you can start doing the same kind of, you have the same tools that you had in the base correction page, but now they're here so that you can get those to match. And if you pull up the video scopes under the view menu, this is also the beauty of getting your shot set up in a side-by-side configuration, is it also shows them in the scopes. So in our particular case, we've actually broken it up into two different scopes, where the hero shot is that shot over on, or the video scope on the left, and the shot on the right is the middle video scope. And so if you can set up your shots in this way, again, regardless of what software you're in, not only can you compare them visually side by side and kind of see those differences by eye, but in the scopes as well. So if you do me a favor, in the middle video scope, if you'll just go ahead and click in the middle of it anywhere, that's going to switch it over to the waveform, and then do the one on the left. So visually, or I mean, at least looking at the scopes, you can see the trace is a lot higher on the shot on the left. So you can see the exposure is a lot brighter. Now, naturally, we would expect that because this is a, like kind of a morning scene where light's coming in through the window. Whereas the shot on the right, you can see the trace is all gathered and collected closer towards the bottom. And so you can see the shot is a lot darker because the context of this is a night scene. So we would actually expect that. But, if we were going through the shots and we had other, shots of the gentleman on the shot on the left, if there was different shots, we could compare the level of those traces, how high or low, and we could get them to match.
Absolutely. That's awesome. Very convenient, very easy to hop between these. In terms of this first stage, how important is it, like in that base correction section as well, like color balancing so that all the different channels are the same level?
That's actually a good question. I think somebody that's new to color correction and is first learning how to use the scopes to help them to assist them with color correction is they immediately want to think that I need to have red, green, and blue balanced, perfectly evenly for the shot to be considered white balanced.
Right.
But what you have to remember is that context is a big part. So I think that you had stated earlier this was shot in the evening. Is that right?
Yeah, right around dusk. So
okay, so it looks to me like maybe the sun has already dipped behind the horizon, and so I would naturally expect things to look cooler. Plus, a big part of the shot is the actual sky, is what we're seeing, and so naturally we should expect to see the blue to be a lot higher. We don't actually have anything white that's in the shot. I guess it looks like at the very top of the frame, it's a little bit white, but I just want to emphasize that, for beginners, they think that everything has to be balanced and neutral, even. And that's not really the way it should actually look. Again, going back to scene referred, if you go back to the first shot, if we try to say balance the wall in the background, you can see the red channel is slightly elevated above the green and the blue channel. But if you were to, say press the W for the white balancing tool, and then just, you manually try to get those to balance evenly. See, now you've balanced it, but you're like, that doesn't quite look right. When I was there looking at it by eye, and of course our eyes kind of play tricks on us too. Our eyes actually kind of white balance the same as like a camera does. Our eyes actually, adjust to the environment. But at any rate, you would look at that and you would say, that doesn't really quite look like a morning scene. And so it's better that it looks, the red channel is slightly elevated above the green and the blue channels. And I once heard a tip that you should have generally you should have kind of a nice little roll off of the red channel going to the green channel to the blue, and you should have a nice little gradual sort of diagonal line, not like a steep one, but just a nice little fall off from the red, green to the blue. I think you'll see a lot of different scenes. That's the way that actually looks.
Absolutely. Okay, well, these are looking good on that base correction. Might get just a little.
We kind of pretended, shot matched them, so to speak.
Yeah.
We didn't have quite the shots in the same scene. But now if you go to the final grading page, now is where we can start exploring different look ideas. And when you get to this stage in your post-production or your grading process, is you want to have like an objective. You want to ask yourself some questions like, what should the mood be for this? And if you're going for a mood, then you can look at, color theory and what different colors, bring out different emotions and feelings. Um, Mood's one thing, but it could be, what is the location? You find that a lot of different films where you're jumping back and forth between two different locations, between say like an urban, environment like New York City or London, and jump into say, like Mexico City or, like the Sahara, they have, they're color correct or graded in a different way to kind of give context. So location is another consideration as far as your objective goes. Time of day. Are you trying to suggest that this is in the morning and he's just like waking up and he's having like a bowl of cereal? Or is it like midday, or is it dusk? Is it past, sunset? So time of day is another consideration. Genre, if you're, trying to make this look old or kind of vintage, you might give it a different grade. Say like a flashback scene, you would grade that differently. So all these different subtle cues gives to your audience context for what's happening in the scene, and all these ideas are things to just sort of support the story and the emotion of the story, to actually kind of magnify that, not to be distracting, but to just kind of enhance the story.
Absolutely. So at this level, it is morning, and he's in that state of just having woke up. But we do want to create, I'd say, maybe a bit more distinction between him and everything else that's going on in frame. What would be some pointers to do that?
So what we could do is manually from here, we could just now intentionally, you could press the W button for the white balance. And we could actually drag that up to actually warm up the shot. So see, that's a little bit more, intentional. And if we could, we'll actually circle back, but if you go to the clips at the bottom, I just want to point out something here in the workflow. Hit the escape key.
Yep.
There you go. If you go to the shot of the gentleman, you'll see that same correction or that same grading was applied to this clip as well. Now, the reason why that happened is because in the shot matching page, when we color coded them, go up to the top. Yep. We color coded them together where we said, here's a scene. These are supposed to all look alike, right? After you've fixed the shots and matched them together, when we then move to the final grading page, we can actually apply a final look over top of the clips as sort of like a filter effect. Or if you're familiar with Photoshop or using adjustment layers in Premiere, you can think of the adjustment layer as sort of a filter effect over the top of it. And this will actually save you so much time in the long run, because a lot of time we get really excited after we've wrapped a shoot and we jump on the first shot that we get really excited about. Oh, I love the way that really turned out. And we immediately jump in to start, creating a look for it, or we, throw on a lookup table to, give it that certain mood. And then we get to we go to our next shot, and then we try to figure out, oh, wait, how do I get this shot to now match with this one that I've just dived into and I've created a look for it. And when I was first starting out, that was a big struggle of mine, is I'd get excited and I'd immediately jump into creating a look, creating that final finished polished end look. And then I'd move to the next shot and I think, oh gosh, I have to somehow come up with a way to get this now to match. So I throw on the same LUT. I throw on the same lookup table and be like, wait a second. I'm using the same LUT, but these two shots don't look the same, like not even close. And so following this workflow will actually, speed up your productivity by like 3 times by being able to get your shots to match and then apply that final creative look grade. The way to do that in Final Cut, there's a couple different ways. Number one is you can use compound clips, where you kind of combine the clips together. The second way is kind of a hack, but there's sort of a pseudo adjustment layer that you can Google search for, like just type in Final Cut and adjustment layer. And that adjustment layer is actually really a title. It's just a blank title, but you can use that as a sort of pseudo adjustment layer. Of course, in Premiere Pro, it does support adjustment layers, so you can just drag that adjustment layer over top of your clips, above the clips below. And in DaVinci Resolve, it actually supports groups similar to Cinema Grade, where you can say this shot, this shot, this shot. These are a scene. I want to be able to treat the final look that I apply to these. I want to treat these all as the same.
Awesome. Yeah, that definitely is going to speed things up. For those that are watching, again, just a reminder, if you're watching us on Instagram and you're seeing a lot of crop on the programs themselves, we will have this on YouTube and Facebook. Well, it's going to be on Facebook and YouTube as well. It will live kind of forever on YouTube. So be sure to check that out and you'll be able to see all of the details of these programs. Like Denver's saying, you can do this. Most of what we've done in each of these programs, Cinema Grade just happens to make it a bit more streamlined and easy for you. So, well, very good. So now let me hop back into the share and we're going to go back to Cinema Grade because we have a couple important things left to do here. Okay, so
we can manually do it, but if you actually go over to the left, Brandon,
yeah.
Over on the left side, a menu is going to pop out. And here we have stored in here some looks. And also if you have LUTs, on your computer, you can find these here. And what's really neat about this is we can actually show you real-time previews of your different looks and LUTs. In this case, these are the looks that are built in and they follow like a similar theme. So for instance, if we want this to be a period look, you can see there's some 70s look. Obviously all these different pre-built looks aren't going to work with every shot in every single context, but sometimes, and this is what's great about LUTs is they can serve as sort of starting ideas. They give you opportunities to visualize, different looks. And then you can experiment with them and see, which one kind of accomplishes that. Am I trying to convey a mood? Am I trying to suggest a certain location? Am I trying to suggest a different time of day? And so these can give you a great, a great running start.
Yeah, definitely a lot of different options here. So we're not even to the bottom yet. So
some of these are also film stocks. Some people might be interested.
Yeah, so beyond the film stock itself, like in terms of the color, like pulling those colors from those, is there any element of grain to this as well, or is this purely on the look side of?
We do have a grain feature. I think we just need to do something to update your license, but I think doing so would reveal your email address. So I don't know if you want to share that. If you're comfortable and fine with it, I'll show you. I can tell you what to do.
Hey, you know what? I'll do it for the people. Just don't mess with me. What's up?
All right. Go up to the Cinema Grade menu at the top. It's up at the very top.
Okay.
Go to registration. And click on upgrade. Yep. And then just go ahead and close that.
Okay.
So now I think ideally, go back to the final grading page. We're back on the base correction page.
Okay.
think now if you go to looks and you go scroll down to the bottom, you might actually have to
close it and restart it.
Yeah, we might have to restart it.
We'll pretend that these are all, up and working. My bad for not having it 100% up to date.
Oh, no problem.
But if you need to update your cinema grade, you do so by going up there. Registration update. Good to know. So perfect. Well,
but if you scroll up, there's other ones that you can just click, and they'll just apply it. Now, if you do go the route of applying lookup tables or different looks, you'll definitely want to have the ability to kind of scale them back or adjust the mix or the intensity slider or the opacity, because they might not look, the look might be good, but they might not look great at like 100%. So any one of those that kind of is the general direction of kind of what you're thinking, you can click on it, and then I'll show you what to do to dial it back.
Okay.
So if you go over now to the right, the inspector should come out. Hit escape maybe.
Oh. Went one step too far. I don't know if it's because of screen sharing or what. I don't know why it's not popping up the.
Maybe go to shot matching page just to kind of like refresh it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really strange.
Computer's not liking me today.
Why don't you click apply? Let's go ahead and apply that look inside of Final Cut. Just click all grades. Now, if you toggle back over to Final Cut, you'll see that our changes have been applied. So if you'll do me a favor, just go to Cinema Grade and just maybe close the program. Just toggle back over to it.
Yeah.
And then just Command Q it. Yeah. And then just relaunch Cinema Grade again. And now if you go back to the final grading page.
There we go.
Okay. So if you see there, the top slider that says preset or LUT, it's at 100%. If you click and drag on that mix slider, you can kind of scale it back. And then also remember, we actually adjusted the white. We adjusted the color temperature or the white balance, and we really warmed up the shot. We did that earlier. But at any rate, this is like really the fun part, I feel like, of color grading is trying to go for a look that really enhances the storytelling. That's a different tool there. The look transfer tool is, but you can adjust the temperature again if you want to fine tune that.
Yeah.
That's about the middle of the inspector. It's at 77,000 something.
Cool.
But, when you're creating looks, I suggest that you go extreme, like you really, push things. So at least you can see how far you can push them. And then ideally, the software will have a way of allowing you to sort of dial back the effect. Because it's easier to, go too far and just kind of dial it back than it is to not say go far enough and then have to make a bunch of, smaller changes to try to get more of that same effect or to get that same impact. But nice. Let's go to our last shot. You see, when you bring up the navigation there, there you go. Now here, if you have some ideas, you can start adjusting the controls. One thing we could do, and I think your audience will love this, if you press V for the vectors tool, we can do some really cool secondary. And anywhere that you can click on her blue hat. And now if you drag, click on it to place a point, and if you drag up and down on that point, you can actually adjust the color of her hat, or essentially all the blues in the shot. And so you can kind of just adjust that and play with that until you kind of get a nice sort of look that you like. Of course, you can go really far with it, go extreme. But you could kind of adjust that to go for a sort of, stylized effect.
Yeah.
Maybe not purple, but a nice kind of like teal color. There you go. That's starting to look really nice.
Cool.
You could do something like that. And then again, you have some pre-built looks and your LUTs that are just at your disposal. If you go to LUTs, Cinema Grade does ship with a few LUTs that you can use.
Yeah, I really like to pull from like the Fuji and Kodak lines.
So yeah, go ahead and apply that then. Click accept and then, dial it back, because a lot of these different, looks they're intended to be extreme so that you can easily just kind of bring them back. And then I think you might have mentioned this is supposed to be like at golden hour, or just kind of, is it supposed to be kind of a sunset shot? You said
Yeah.
like the sun had already maybe gone down. If you adjust the color temperature with W, or you can adjust the temp in the slider, you can actually kind of warm that shot up a little bit, and you can kind of give it that.
We can come back here.
You can kind of go back and almost make it look as if, the sun is still up, because what actually happens during magic hour or golden hour is, while the sun is still up, the color temperature of the sun is really warm. And so everything that's in the highlights, everything that's being exposed or illuminated by the sun, is going to have a nice golden look to it. And at the same time, simultaneously, everything that's in the shade or in the shadows is primarily being illuminated by the sky. And the sky, of course, is blue. And so the sky is acting like this big blue bounce card. And so I think one of the reasons why magic hour is such a beautiful time of day is you get this natural color contrast of, really honestly, orange and teal, just by virtue of the lighting, where the sun is illuminating everything in the highlights, giving it a nice, beautiful gold, shimmer look to it. And everything that's in the shadows and the shade is getting that nice, cool light from the sky that's acting as like basically a big bounce card.
Very nice. It's fun to be able to hop in and just play with things like so directly with the image. It's, I'd say, the most unique aspect of using Cinema Grade is just being able to, click directly on what you're trying to adjust. You know what you're adjusting.
Yeah. You could
And
even adjust the color of I think the foliage there, some of the pine
yeah,
needles.
so starting to get a
right on a
bit
green.
hot. Well, not that way.
You can kind of warm those up a little bit or cool them down. Just kind of however you see fit.
And is there a way to dial in the saturation on a particular point?
So what you can do while you're in the vectors tool, wherever you place a point, if you press and hold you have to use a modifier, keyboard modifier.
Okay.
If you hold shift while you click and drag on that point, you can adjust the saturation.
Because we are in a desert, these trees haven't seen water for a bit, so we're gonna reflect that just a little bit so that they don't steal the thunder from
There you
the
go.
audience, from the talent. Okay.
If you click on her hat, another thing I'll show you, if you click on her hat, you can also adjust the luma or the density by holding down the command key. So if you hold down the command on the keyboard, now if you drag up and down, you can actually adjust the density in the blues to either lighten or, darken them.
Yeah, that's nice. It's crazy how much it isolates just that.
If you go up to the top right hand next to the apply, there's an eyeball looking thing there. You can toggle that on and off to see like our before, what we actually started with, and what our final look is. So again, that's combined our base correction. We didn't necessarily have anything other shots to match with this same shot. And then we can get to like our final look grade for the film.
Well, perfect. And then once we're ready, we just Simply hit apply, hit all grades, continue.
And then you have to toggle back over to Final Cut. And if you just move your playhead,
now we have those looks.
Have that final look applied. It looks beautiful.
Well, fantastic. That's a simple way to, normally all those things would be built out in several different layers of, using the different correction tools. Select on too many shots.
Now, certainly there are some, limitations within Cinema Grade as far as, not supporting, HSL keys or masks. For those issues, you'd still want to use the native built-in tools. But overall, I want people to see, the whole general workflow, because I think this is the thing that will have the biggest impact, or, that's, the biggest parting wisdom that I can leave for you, is to follow like a workflow, is to be disciplined in, fixing your shots, making them look scene referred or the same way as they did on set, establishing those relationships between different shots in a scene, grouping them together. And then, through either an adjustment layer or through the grouping, apply like a final look that, supports the emotion of the story. And you'll find if you follow this workflow that you'll be able to color correct and grade in your software of choice 3 times faster than ever before. And the quality will be much, much better.
Well, thank you for giving us that walkthrough and, helping, as we have this timeline. Again, next week, guys, is when we'll have that premiere on next Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Central Time. We'll be premiering this whole film. We'll have a lot of fun. It'll be about an hour-long stream altogether, where we'll have cast and crew, and you can ask us all the questions that you have about the production overall, how it went, and hopefully we'll have a really out of this park film for you guys. So I'm looking forward to that, and love getting in the color with you, Denver. So thank you for helping us.
It's my pleasure.
If you are looking for any particular tools like Cinema Grade, be sure to check out cinemagrade.com, I believe. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's the URL. And one thing that might be relevant to your audience is we released Cinema Grade 2 years ago, and by far the number one question that we have gotten back is, why don't we support Windows? And so it just so happens that we are actually going to support Windows, and we're going to be launching a Kickstarter campaign on October 7th at 11 a.m. Eastern. So that's coming up here in just 2 weeks. Those users that are on Windows will have an opportunity to get Cinema Grade for Windows, and that'll work as a plugin inside of Adobe Premiere, and plans also to support DaVinci Resolve.
Well, that's fantastic. So if this is something that you're interested in and you are on the Windows side of things, check it out, and that'll be a great way to help support Denver. Denver, keep up the great work. Thank you for your time here today, and we'll see you all next week, Tuesday. So don't miss that premiere, and much more to come. Thank you again, and we'll see you next time.
All the best. Thank you.